So jumping right in, does parenting ever feel like this? Especially when we're talking about kids with multiple ages and in different grades, and then you sprinkle in technology, and sometimes it can just be really overwhelming, right? So that's what we're really going to cover this morning. And hopefully by the time our hour here is through, those flames are going to feel a little less high and you're going to walk away feeling maybe a little less overwhelmed and afraid and hopefully more empowered to help take control because you'll have some of these new tools and resources to go out and help protect your family. So as Liz said, this is my family. I am in Michigan and I am married to a high school guidance counselor. We've been married for over 25 years now. And even before we had kids, even back at that time when cell phones and social media was not nearly as prevalent, he would say that not a day goes by that he doesn't have someone in his office because of something that happened online, something they posted or commented on or said to somebody online. So we see on a daily basis the effect that technology and phones and social media has on our kids. And we have 4 kids of our own. My oldest is a senior getting ready to graduate, and my daughter is a sophomore. My middle one there, Brady, is in 7th grade, and my youngest is in 4th grade. So we span elementary, middle school, and high school. So even though I'm very blessed to be part of this great PYU research team and the advocacy work, probably the thing that most qualifies me to be with you this morning are these 4 reasons that I am on this motherhood journey with you. And when my children were young, I was really active in our moms groups. We had a couple of moms and mops groups in our city here. And so it was such a great chance for me to connect with other moms. And I will say that some of my very best friends to this day are still moms that I met in those moms groups. And some of my kids' best friends are ones that they grew up from those moms groups. So I especially love having the chance like this to be able to speak with young moms of kids and just know how important this time and that gathering is. So this is my daughter, Allie. You just saw 16-year-old Allie. Now we're going to back up and see 5-year-old Allie, because she came home from kindergarten and she said, Mom, this is so exciting. Tomorrow is career day. That means we get to dress up like who we want to be, and then we get to talk about it. So I said, okay, that's great. What do you think you want to do when you grow up? She says, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to be a cowgirl. I said, okay, very cool. Let's go to the dress up bin, because all of us probably have a dress up bin with everything in it, right? And I said, let's see, let's just get some ideas. I'm just sitting here in front of my computer. So I'm just going to type in pictures of cowgirls. I can't see your faces, but if I can, I'd probably see some shocked eyes or maybe a lot of laughing, like, Michelle, you have to know what's going to come up on that screen, right? And I definitely should have, but I didn't think of it quick enough before all the leather studded chaps came up right in front of my daughter's eyes. I consider myself a pretty protective and cautious mom. And in that instant, I just exposed her to a whole lot of, let's just say, inappropriate content that flashed up before I could minimize it quick enough. So I share this for 2 reasons. Sometimes it's moms. It's kind of nice to hear a mom fail, right? Like, hey, we're pretty darn good, but it's not always perfect. And it happens to the best of us. But more importantly, if it was that easy for an overprotective mom like myself to expose my daughter to that by one accidental click, it's a good reminder of how easy it is for our kids to either curiosity or on accident search and see something online that then they can't unsee. So had I known this about 11 years ago and had some of these protections in place, hopefully a lot of those pictures would never have even come up. So this jumps us into who we are. Protect Young Eyes, we exist because parents are afraid, rightly so, of what their kids could experience online. We have research, education, and advocacy to give families and moms like you practical solutions so you feel more prepared, balanced, and protected online. So we're going to cover a lot this morning, but it's really important that you also have this continuous resource. So that way later today, when you have questions, or next week, or your kids get older and new apps come out, that you have these places to go find these research. So one of those is our website, protectyoungeyes.com. And if you check it out, you'll see over 110 apps are on there. So if your child wants to get a specific app, you can look on there and see what the good part of the app is, and then what parents need to be concerned about, and then how to mitigate those risks. It has screenshots and scrolling videos of setting parental controls, step-by-step directions for apps and specific devices. So it's a great resource to continue with to find this information. We also have an app called Protect that we'll talk a little bit about at the end, and social media. So even though I'm here to answer all of your questions here in an hour, I am sure there's probably going to be some questions that come up later, and now you know where to look for those. So this is our founder, Chris McKenna. This just shows some of our advocacy work. This is him in Capitol Hill in 2019. He actually testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee about big tech. We are also very involved in setting legislation and actually on the parental controls panel for places such as Snapchat and Apple, trying to make things safer from the top down. So we're going to start off by grounding ourselves in some scripture from Deuteronomy. It says, "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." So just by you coming today and taking this time, we're all taking that first step to educate ourselves a little bit more, learn what we can to help mitigate those risks. And yes, we are going to be great moms and pray and guide our children, but we also know that that's not enough. We need to take these practical steps. And so that leads us to our position on phones and social media. And we're not a no tech company, but we're a slow tech company. We believe in delaying. So we believe that kids really don't have a need for a smartphone until they're in high school. And we also think that kids' brains are not ready for the demands and complexity of social media before the age of 16. And so I want to ask you, are any of you upset or bummed that you didn't grow up with cell phones and social media? And so I believe you're probably gathered maybe with other moms at some small groups or some tables. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to kind of discuss on your own if you're upset about that, or if you are happy that you didn't grow up with all of this technology and social media. Why? Why are you happy that not everything that you did was recorded and posted and commented and liked upon? So Liz, if it's all right, I'm just going to be quiet here for a couple minutes and let your moms kind of discuss at their tables a couple of the reasons why either they wish they would have had social media and phones, or why they're glad that they didn't have that. And then in a few minutes, I may just ask you to kind of pull out some key phrases that you heard either way. I will say that I have given this talk many, many, many times, and I have yet to have one hand say that they wish they had. So I would have been a safe bet to guess that. Wonderful. Well, I'm sure that your moms probably discussed a lot of these same reasons why we're happy. A lot of them that I've heard in the past with other parents is, hey, we were able to socially interact more with people face to face. We're playing outside. We were able to be more creative and imaginative. We didn't have that constant worry of everything that we said. I think one of my favorite responses was, we had no proof, right? Which is kind of funny, but also kind of true. Any embarrassing thing that you did or said was not posted and lived on forever. So I think we can all agree, it sounds like, that we were all pretty happy that we didn't grow up with it. So why is it that we are oftentimes so quick to give it to our kids at this early age? And I totally understand how so many of our kids are saying that so many of their friends have these at an early age, and we don't want them to feel left out. But it's also important for us to remember these reasons why we're thankful we didn't have it, and then think, is it the right time to be giving these devices and technology and social media to our kids at these very important developmental ages? And we say this because no middle school child or any age is a better version of themselves emotionally, spiritually, relationally, because of the presence of social media in their life. We've done lots of research and read lots of studies, and we've yet to find any study that said going outside and playing outdoors and socially in person is a bad thing for kids, right? So this is why we're very strong on this position with delaying technology. Now, we also know that moms in the group and elsewhere have different thoughts and maybe have already given kids phones or technology. And so no matter where you are on that journey, it's not too late to still put in those protections and improve where you are. So we're not saying, hey, if you already gave your kid a cell phone, it's too late. There's no backtracking, right? Absolutely not. We can still make them safer. And yes, we have that age there of 16, but it's also important to know that you know your child best. And I think we can all agree that sometimes kids are maybe ready for things before a certain age, or even more importantly, maybe even at that golden age, maybe your child still isn't ready. I know with my 4 kids, there's a lot of differences, right? Some of my younger kids are maybe more mature and responsible than some of my older kids. So instead of just having that concrete number, another good thing to think about when your kid is asking for a phone or device or technology is looking at these 3 simple questions. And one is, can I trust my child to stay home by themselves for a couple of hours? Because they should be able to be responsible enough to do that in the real world before you're giving them the power in the digital world. Another cue that your child should be ready is, are they able to introduce themselves to an adult? That means smile at them, look them in the eye, shake their hand. Hi, my name is. Why is that important? Because those are pretty basic social skills that they should be able to have in the real world, again, before they're thrown into the social chaos of social media. And third thing, you should be able to ask your child, hey, tell me 3 great characteristics or qualities about yourself. And they should be able to be confident enough to say some things that it makes them wonderful. Why is that important? Because it's so important that kids know their true identity and their character, and they know that before they go into social media, where there are many people out there who are ready to tell them otherwise what their identity is and who they are. So those are some social cues that you can look for, as well with the age number, to see if you believe that they're ready for their own technology. And then the rest of our basis of this morning is built on creating this digital trust, and we use this digital trust framework. So we want to avoid parenting on the 2 outside columns. We don't want to be that spying helicopter mom based out of fear-based parenting and control. We also don't want to be parenting from that other column where it's passive and silent and just not involved in their technology use. But instead, we want to be really intentional with our parenting in the middle, because we have spoken with thousands of parents who have kids who use technology well, and they do these things consistently. So we've given them all 5 C starting words to make it easy to remember. It's copy me, co-play, curiosity, conversation, and coaching. And we're going to break down each of these 5 C words. We're going to give some practical examples and some solutions on how to create digital trust with each of those. So the first one is copy me. Would you want your kids to use their technology just like you use it? Where you use it, how often you're on it, what you're interrupted by, what you're using it for? And it's always kind of ironic, because you're probably thinking, wait, okay, I came here and I thought I was going to talk about my child's technology use. And instead, it's really intentional that the very first piece we're starting with is our personal use. Because we know, especially as moms of young kids, that we are our kids' greatest role model, right? We know that they're always watching us and taking their cues from us. But sometimes I think we forget that technology is included in this as well. So how often are they seeing us interrupted by our phones, or maybe getting up from the table if our text message goes off? Or how many times are our kids trying to get our attention and we're half talking to them and half checking our email? So our kids are always watching our technology, and it's a good reminder for us to be that force of how we use our technology, of later on the road, how we want them to use their technology. Our late friend Colin Kirchner said, showing your kids you love them is 2% effort and 98% putting down your phone. And some of the developmental delays that we're seeing in kids, some researchers have actually likened it to secondhand smoke, with being the parent's smartphone usage, because we are oftentimes distracted from our kids, and our kids pick up on that with our divided attention. We especially see that in young babies. And again, as moms, we completely understand this, right? That face-to-face personal interaction that we have with our kids. There's actually called a still face experiment that's on YouTube that you can watch right now, where a mom and baby are interacting, and then it gets interrupted with the cell phone, and you see physical signs of distress on the baby's face. So we know that our kids are watching and in tune with how we are using our technology. So we have to be very mindful of that, and what we're using our technology for, and how they're watching us do that. So it brings us to screen time, which is probably one of the biggest questions, especially from young moms, where I say, what is the right amount of screen time for our kids? And you might be surprised to hear these latest statistics from a report in 2021 from Common Sense Media. Kids ages 8 to 12. Any ideas how much screen time they had on a daily basis? What was the average amount of screen time in either minutes or hours? You can shout out some numbers if I can hear you, or Liz, you can just relay them. If not, just kind of Oh, with your moms at the group, what do you think the average amount of screen time was for an 8 to 12-year-old? 5 hours? It's perfect. 5.5 hours for 8 to 12-year-olds. So we're looking at that elementary to early middle school, 5.5 hours a day on screens. As we bump up and look at our teenager of 13 to 18-year-olds, 8.5 hours on screens. And those are staggering numbers, right? They're kind of eye-opening. Until my screen time alert goes off on Sunday. I get it every week on my iPhone. I'm sure some of you do as well, where it'll say what your screen time is. And sometimes you look at it and say, how did I spend that many hours on the screen and on the phone, right? So it's something just to be mindful of with our kids of how much time they're spending on screens. And in addition to how much time they're spending, it's also important to see how that affects their developing brain. Because we know that when our kids are young right now, their brains are neuroplastic, which means they're shapeable and they're moldable. And these brains actually learn to crave what we feed it most. We've seen with research that it actually fires off new neurons and synapses when they're learning things new. So if during this important developmental time, we're putting all of this technology in front of them, that's what their brain is learning to crave. And it actually changes the rewiring process of their brain. Another study that just came out that shows that as their screen time increases, their ability to concentrate and focus decreases. And that's because when you're online, it showed that their brain was actually switching functions every few seconds to new stimuli. And think about the things that we're doing online when they're looking at their games, how fast paced it's moving. Think about us when we're scrolling through news feeds and switching videos. It's true, every few seconds, we're switching back and forth to activities online. So what happens to our brains and our kids' brains when we take them out of that fast-paced world online and put them in real life and in a classroom where things don't move that quickly, then they have problems concentrating and focusing. So some of these are really important to see how much time they're spending on screens, and then more importantly, what the effects on their brain development and their behavior is because of all of the screen time. So when we're looking at what is the right amount of screen time, we know that the World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics all agree on the three things. Almost no sedentary screen time for 0 to 2. Less is almost always best. And that role model, how adults use technology, impacts how our kids use technology. So being mindful of how much time they're spending on screens and deciding as a family how you want to take control of technology instead of having this technology be a constant source of argument in your home. One of the research studies that really spoke to me that we started implementing in our families, and I often share this, especially with young moms, and I get a lot in the feedback too, in case it's something that resonates with you. Instead of focusing technology on the negative, right? Hey, if you're punishing, you're going to take away screen time because it's what they all covet, right? That's such a common thing. Instead of looking at technology as a thing you're trying to manage and fight against, instead focus on your family as a whole and the positives. So think about what you want to accomplish every day with your family. So you may say, hey, every day I want to accomplish 3 things. I want to eat dinner together as a family. I want to have some time for my kids to play outside, and I want to have some time for them to read. And if at the end of the night, you've accomplished all 3 of those things and you have some leftover time, and then maybe your child asks if they can jump on their Nintendo Switch, then maybe that's okay, right? Because you got all of the positives that you wanted to, and now there's leftover time for technology instead of that being the main focus. When we talk about how we use technology, we talk about the toxic trio, which also talks about where we use technology. And bedroom, boredom, and darkness are 3 places that exponentially increase the likelihood that you may click on something or send something or comment on something that otherwise you would not. It makes it more risky. So we say phones and devices should not belong in the bedroom or bathroom. Obviously, when you're thinking about older teens and kids and all of the sexting and sending nudes, that's just a really practical place, right? We only use our technology in our common areas in our homes so we can see what type of pictures that you're taking and sending. And darkness, we know that just at night, when it's that boredom and that nighttime scrolling, you're just more likely to maybe visit some sites or send something that you otherwise wouldn't. I know that kind of old saying that my mom used to say, hey, Michelle, nothing good happens after 10 p.m. Think about that same thing with your technology. So maybe in your house, have these rules with your kids and their technology. Say, hey, okay, maybe all tech is turned off at 8 o'clock at night. And all phones and iPads are on a charging table in the kitchen. So that way they're all in one place. We're not having phones in bedrooms. We're not having phones in the bathrooms. They're in public places where they're monitored. And then we talk about device and co-ownership. So if your child has an iPad or an iPhone, it shouldn't be password protected that you don't know. You should be able to pick up their phone at any time and look through what they're sending and receiving. Now, is this spying? No, we never advocate spying, but we do always encourage monitoring. And what's the difference? It's a question I get all the time. Monitoring is your kids know what you're doing because you've set up these expectations from the very start. So we say, hey, at any point in time, mom or dad should be able to pick up your phone and type in your code and see what you're doing online. And if you're using your technology responsibly, that shouldn't be a problem, right? We're not out here spying. We're not trying to catch you doing something right. We're just coaching you along the way. So we always advocate for that monitoring and being open to create that digital trust with our kids. So again, remember the responsibility of us as parents for being that positive role model on how we use our technology. One thing I always like to share, especially with moms groups too, is what we are posting as moms. Because sometimes I think we can be guilty of over posting for whatever reason. If we're looking for the likes and comments, I know it's great. We all want to brag about our cute kids and our babies. And sometimes we post things that share too much information. Especially think of back to school time in the fall when you're sharing pictures of your kids holding that little chalkboard saying, hi, this is my name and this is my grade and this is my teacher's name where I go to school. Hey, here's my bus number. Here's the name of my little league team. Wow, you just gave a lot of personal information about your child to everyone. And I think we can probably all agree that all of our friends and contacts online are probably not all of our closest friends that we otherwise would share all of that information with. So one is obviously just a safety and security issue that we don't want to overpost about our kids. You know, these cute, embarrassing bath time pictures that we think are funny, not the place to share those. And also we want to think about the privacy for our kids because we know that by the time they're 2 years old, 90% of kids already have a digital footprint. Obviously, they've had no say in what's been posted about them. So we need to think about their digital footprint, what they're going to look back on someday and what we've posted. And also as our kids get a little bit older, it's important for us to post with permission. So even my youngest, who's only 9, if I take a picture and maybe want to post it on Facebook, I will always show him the picture first. And of course, I do this with my older teens, but I'll even show him and say, hey, is it okay if I post this picture? And if he doesn't want it, then I don't post it. It's important for us to teach kids respect and consent, because especially now as we're seeing with teenagers and the sending of nudes and all of the chaos in this, a lot of it stems from posting and sending pictures and things that they're sending without their consent. And that leads to so much trauma and additional drama. So we have to teach that to our kids from an early age, that we're being respectful and getting their consent before we're posting about them as well. So Ephesians 6:4 says, fathers, do not exasperate your children, but instead bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So now we're going to jump into our second word, which is co-play. And I think this is the fun one because this is probably what we're all best at. It is playing with our kids. It is being involved in their technology usage. Why? Because when we're involved with our kids in what they're doing online, it's a great window into their heart and we can learn a lot about them as well. So my 2 younger boys, they have a Nintendo Switch. They love to play Mario Kart. They love to ask me to play. I am terrible at it. I come in last every single time. But whenever they ask me to play, of course I do, because it's time that I'm spending with them in something that they are interested in. And it's a great way for me to see how they handle competitiveness and losing. And we've had some good teachable moments on that. And oftentimes when they're involved in something, they're more open. You know, instead of sometimes they come home from school, what'd you do today? Oh, it was fine. We didn't do much. Sometimes we don't get a lot of information, but when we're involved with them, they start talking more and we can see how they're interacting with others and their games. And that is a big thing with a lot of parents and kids out there who have video game kids who like to play games and apps on them. And oftentimes I get the question, what's the worst game to avoid? Or what's the safest game for my kid to play out there? And it's not so much specific games, as it is what features each game has. So I will say that one of the most dangerous features a game can have would be a chat feature. Because if you give your child an app with a chat feature on it, you're basically giving them a direct line of communication to anyone in the world. And we obviously cannot control what someone else will send or say to our child. So for instance, Roblox is a really important game, especially for older elementary and middle school kids and boys. A lot of kids play Roblox, and some parents may not even realize that it does have a chat feature. So that inherently makes it more dangerous. But the good news is for that specifically with Roblox, you can disable that chat feature. It only takes about 3 clicks and you can turn that feature off. So once you do that, it makes the game much safer. So that's why, again, we recommend going to our website, learning about the games and apps that your kids are on, finding out what's dangerous, and then most importantly, finding out if there are steps you can take, such as that, to mitigate those risks to make them safer. So now we're going to jump into social media. And depending on the ages of your kids, maybe some of your older kids have social media. I can probably guarantee you, even if your kids don't, they will be or have already been exposed to them at some point. So my kids always say, boy, we are so lucky. We have a counselor for a dad and a mom who teaches digital safety. We're the last kids of our friends to get any type of technology, right? They were. We had the delay. And so they didn't get their smartphones and their social media till they were older. But I did go on a field trip with my daughter in 6th grade to a choir concert, and her friend that she was sitting next to on the bus had Snapchat. So what was my daughter looking at the whole trip, even though she didn't even have a phone? Snapchat. So I think we all know that our kids are exposed to these, even if they don't have them personally. So it's important for us to learn about it. So we're going to talk about a few of these top apps real quickly. Why? Because if our kids are on them or exposed to them, we need to know about them. Because if we don't know anything about them, how are we going to know how to make them safer, right? So if you're sitting next to your friends there, maybe you can answer some of the questions. If anybody knows what that purple Space Invaders type guy is, that app is actually called Among Us. It was one of the most popular apps during COVID time, and it's actually one of the least amount of rated. It's rated at only a 9+. If we look at that pug nose and the purple one, if anybody knows what that is, that's usually the hardest one to guess on the board. That is Discord. Discord, thank you. So we have a lot of moms there who know. That is one of the social media gaming platforms. It's actually the oldest rated app that you can see there. It's rated at 17+. And when we talk about app ratings, here's kind of another good cautionary tale. If your child wants an app, one of the things you do is look at the app rating to see if it's appropriate, kind of like with movies, right? But don't always go by just the app rating alone, because COPA actually set a federal rule before the year 2000 that said any app developer could not collect any personal information from anyone under the age of 13. That's what social media does, right? It collects information. So it's actually a federal law that you're not even supposed to have social media until you're at least 13 years old. Any guesses on what the rating of the top apps like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram are? Are there any ages being thrown out there with what app rating they think they are? That would be great. They are rated 12+. You're not even supposed to have social media until 13, yet all of these are rated as 12+. So take that with a grain of salt when you're checking at app ratings. It does not necessarily mean, because I think we can all agree that there are lots of things on Snapchat and TikTok that are not appropriate for 12-year-olds. So let's jump into TikTok. Obviously, a lot of concerns, especially recently with privacy, with the amount of time that is consumed on TikTok. And we will say that TikTok has one of the most addictive algorithms out there. So for kids and parents, it's easy to spend a lot of time scrolling through videos. And for kids, we also know everyone wants to be the next TikTok star. It's very addictive for their personalities and oftentimes really influential in negative ways. If you remember a few years ago, all of the TikTok challenges at school were very negative. That also looks into Instagram. Over 1,100 pictures posted every second on Instagram. It's, again, also rated a 12+ app. Unfortunately, it's one of the breeding ground for predatory activity, where people will meet online and Instagram and say, hey, let's bump this over to Snapchat, where what happens to all the messages? They disappear. Again, Snapchat is a 12+ rated app. Lots of things about Snapchats that moms and parents should be concerned about. One is that fact that all of the messages disappear. It's kind of bad for two reasons. One is it's very hard to monitor what your kids are sending and receiving if it disappears, right? It's not like a text message thread where you can go through and have conversations and see what they're sending. But we can't monitor it because it disappears. And also, do you think you're going to be more likely to maybe send something or say something a little more inappropriate if you know that it's going to disappear and not be monitored? Absolutely. There's another another big concern with Snapchat is the Snap Map. A lot of parents don't even realize that their kids have it or may have it turned on. But if a kid's locator is on their Snap Map, it means everybody else can see exactly where they are at any given point. And I've been with a group of teenagers where everybody was there except for maybe one person. They all say, well, where's so-and-so? And they all got out their Snapchat and looked, and they all knew exactly where that person was. Obviously, privacy and security issues there with having your child's location be known. So if your child has Snap Map, make sure they put it in ghost mode. Now, is that something us as a parent can set and have it password protected? It's not. So this is where we talk about those relational pieces. You know, parental controls are not just a one easy push of the button and they're all set. It's many layers, and it always has the basis in the relational layer, talking with your kids and building this digital trust, and then sprinkling in this technology of, hey, keep that Snap Map off and in ghost mode so not everyone knows where you are. And then let's see, we haven't talked about Be Real. It's kind of an easy one because it actually has the name in the title. This was actually the most popular app this summer. It's just kind of a fun picture app where anytime randomly throughout the day, your Be Real will go off and you'll take a picture of what you're doing with your front camera and your back camera and share that. So again, if it was the most popular app and your kids were on it or involved in it, you should know more about it. And that leads us to our final one, which is YouTube, probably the most recognizable. Would anyone there be surprised if I said 96,000 videos are watched every minute on YouTube? Anybody surprised on that? I actually lied. It's 96,000 per second. Every second there's 96,000 videos viewed on YouTube. I see two things with this. My first thing I see is I don't know how anybody gets anything done in the world when we're watching 96,000 videos per second, right? And the second is there's just not enough manpower in the world to monitor the content that is uploaded. And we've all heard these terrible stories, right, of streaming and online horrible crimes and such, where eventually, yes, it may get flagged and taken down. But in the meantime, there's so much content on YouTube that is not safe and appropriate for our kids. So one of our biggest recommendations is YouTube should always be supervised with your kids. And yes, YouTube Kids is definitely a safer option, as long as you're putting in your child's correct birthday. And that's true for all of these social media and apps. Make sure your child's birthday is correct, because if they are younger children, like 16 and under, a lot of these, such as TikTok and Snapchat, will automatically default to different parental controls that will make them safer. Are they perfect? No. But is it definitely a benefit? Yes. So even back to YouTube Kids, you set their correct birth date and it'll put them in 3 categories of ages that will deem content appropriate for those ages. A word of caution is, I think we can probably all agree that what YouTube deems appropriate may or may not be what we would still deem appropriate for our kids at those ages. So again, not a perfect solution, still better than traditional YouTube. So important for us to know a little bit more about each of these apps as we are using them and as our kids are using them. An app rating for YouTube, which may be surprising. If I was talking to you here before Christmas, I would tell you that YouTube has an app rating of 17 plus. And that always surprised parents. Why? Because we hand YouTube out like candy, right? Everybody is on YouTube. Many kids under the age of 17 is on YouTube. The reason I said before Christmas is because a few days after Christmas, YouTube just changed the rating from 17 plus down to 12 plus, where it is now. We don't know why, because the content didn't change, or the parental controls, or the marketing of it. So we don't know why they changed from 17 to 12 plus, but the biggest thing that came out of that is parents who had parental controls set up, so maybe they didn't allow apps over 12 or 13, where now all of a sudden YouTube was getting to their kids because it fell below that in that new threshold of app ages, and now was getting through to kids. So still be mindful of the ages and the apps that your kids are on. So we're going to jump into curiosity, and then I'll pause for see what questions that we have in the room. So if all of our tech conversations that we're having with our kids are negative and consequence and yelling, what are the chances that our kids are going to talk to us when something scary or bad happens to them online? And you notice I say when, not if, because we know something at some point is going to happen, right? Remember Cowgirl Alley, how easy it was. So if we're always having these negative connotations of, oh, you're always on your iPad, it's going to be terrible, you're always seeing bad things, and blah, blah, blah. And then it happens, something bad happens online. Do you think the first thing they're going to want to do is run up and say, Mom, look what happened. Everything you said was exactly right. I totally should have listened to you, right? That's probably not the kid's first instinct. So we have to be careful that we are having a posture of curiosity and not condemnation with our kids, so they feel comfortable telling us when something happens online. This was one of our blog posts a few years ago that was really popular, that talked about why kids, especially at young ages, look at pornography. And oftentimes it's not their fault. It's just their developing brain. And we know that when you put a young brain up against the complex rhythms of computers and social media, oftentimes they can't help it because it kind of leads them down this road of where to click. So an example is this. Think of the last time maybe you did some online shopping, or you bought something online, or you were looking at something, and then maybe the next day you opened up your computer or your phone and it has the ads on the side. You're like, oh my gosh, that's like the same thing I was just looking at. Isn't that amazing? It's so smart. It's not that amazing or magic, right? It obviously tracks where we're looking, and then it uses that to then provide new ads or new videos. Think about YouTube and TikTok, right? You may select the videos, and then when they're done, it recommends more videos that are similar to it. So it actually is leading you where to click and look next. And again, when we look at these developing brains, that we know their prefrontal cortex isn't even developed until they're in their 20s. And that's the area of their brain that's responsible for their impulse control and decision making and judgment. We know that's not even ready yet, but yet we're giving them this technology, and then we can't be surprised when they do make mistakes online, because neurologically their brains cannot compete with the technology that they have. Why is curiosity so important? It's not so much that our kids are different than we are. It's just that they have these apps and technology when we didn't. Because if they were around when we were a teen, we probably would have used them exactly the same way. So as parents, we always advocate to do the 7-day rule. So for instance, if your child comes up and said, okay, I really want to have this app or this game, before we just give them access to that, we say download that app or game, use it and play it just like your child would for 7 days. Look at the ads that come up. Look at the different levels of the game. Why 7 days? Because oftentimes those ads and levels change the further on that you get into the app. And after those 7 days, then you can make the decision if that game or app is appropriate for your child. And another thing, a suggestion that we have, is to look out for the ads, because oftentimes we hear, hey, maybe the video or the game that my child was playing was appropriate, but it were the ads that popped up that were inappropriate. And that's oftentimes because the ads do not need to follow the same app rating as what ad that they're being shown on. So for instance, if your child is maybe playing Among Us and it's a 9+ app, it does not mean that the ads also have to be appropriate for 9-year-olds. So you could have more adult apps even on kids' games. So oftentimes when you sign up for these apps, you can either get the free version, or you can typically pay a few dollars a month to get an ad-free version. And we recommend pay for that ad-free version so it takes away the chance and the risk of having that explicit content pop up in the ads that your kid is watching while they're on their games. So Liz, we still have a few more C words to get into and then some parental controls, but I want to pause right now and just see if there are any questions or discussion points that your moms may have before we go on and keep going. It definitely can be. And I will say a big thing that I always advocate, especially for moms like us too, is a lot of grace. I will say that we all struggled, especially during COVID and virtual learning, right? And a lot of rules almost kind of went out the window. Hey, no technology in your bedroom. But guess what? I have now 4 kids set up in different rooms doing online school, and some of that technology was included in that. So I think a lot of it is being filled with grace and doing our best that we can. Our biggest thing that we really tackle in our house is a lot of open and honest communication, because I know that I can't be monitoring every single thing that they do online, nor should we really, right? Especially when you think of our kids and getting older, just like every other aspect in parenting, we want to raise our kids to be independent and responsible. And we can't do that if we're always hovering over every single thing that they do, but instead we want to coach them along the way, check in, have those conversations, but then allow them to learn on their own. Maybe they'll probably make some mistakes. Hopefully they're smaller mistakes. But our biggest thing with all of our 4 kids is constantly checking in and being open with them. So nothing is off limits for what we talk about. And hey, we want to know, hey, who are you talking to today? And what's so-and-so doing, and being involved? Because then they know that we're interested, involved in who they're talking with and what they're doing. And when their friends come over, hey, their friends also know that, hey, mom and dad know what we're talking about. They know who our friends are, what's going on. So I think my biggest piece with our 4 kids is having that communication with all of them and still monitoring the pieces that we need to, and a lot of check-ins throughout the way. And as they get older, yes, our kids have gotten a lot more responsibility. We always say, hey, we will always trust you until you give us a reason not to, right? So as they get older, I mean, my son's 18 now. I probably should take some things off of his phone, but since we started them this way, it's just been what they've been accustomed to as they start their technology. It's not, hey, they know mom and dad aren't just trying to spy on them. We're walking with them and teaching them along the way. So hopefully, and then they get more responsibility as they get older and prove that they are using their technology responsibly. So hopefully that kind of answers some of your question. All right, we'll jump into conversation. This means talking to our kids about all of the awkward things that nobody wanted to talk to us about when we were a kid. That one time dreaded talk where we sat down at this big talk and then you left the room and nobody ever wanted to talk about it again. We can't have that same philosophy and mentality when it comes to conversations now, because we know that kids are going to be curious and they're going to have questions, just like we did. The difference is now they have such an easy way to find the answers. They can look at TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube anytime and be filled with answers. And I think you and I can both agree that the answers they're going to get to their questions from those places are probably not the same answers that we would give them. And they're definitely not given in the same loving, faith-filled background the way that we would give them. So when we talk about this, we say, okay, what is the right age to start having these conversations with our kids? When should we start talking about pornography? So just turn to the mom or 2 next to you and throw out a number. What age do you think it should be when you start to have these conversations about pornography with your kids? And you can probably yell them. I might even be able to hear some ages thrown out there. So here's what I'll say. Whatever number that you just told your friend, subtract 2. Subtract 2 years from it, and that is probably the age that your child is more ready to hear it. Because there may not be a magic number or an age, but we know that 2 things. Our kids are ready to have these conversations before we are. And if we wait until we as parents are ready, then it's probably too late, and there may have already been exposure. So this is another popular blog post. It's on our website. You can scan the QR code there, take a picture of it, visit. And it's a lot of conversation starters about how you start these conversations, even with a 5-year-old, how we talk to them, some of the resources that we can show them. For instance, we recommend the books Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. There's actually 2 different age levels, one for younger kids and one for older kids. But having these conversations early and consistently, because you may say, hey, we're maybe pretty sheltered. We don't have a lot of technology. There's no way my 5-year-old would be exposed. But let me challenge this. If your kindergartner is riding the bus to school, there's probably a great chance that they could be exposed to this. And we know that pornography now has such an earlier age of exposure. The most recent report that just came out from Common Sense Media says the average exposure happens at age 12. For pornography. And 15% actually happens before the age of 10. So exposure is earlier and the content is much more graphic than the pornography that we grew up with. This research and study also showed a lot of other facts So it's about 50-50 if it was curious exposure or accidental exposure. It's about almost 60% accidental, 40% curious. So we see that it's happening. We see that it's happening earlier. And then again, just like with screen time, it's important to see what the effects that has on them. So 50% of kids who were exposed at an early age to pornography felt shameful because of it. Less than half of them actually talked to an adult about the pornography that they saw. 45% of kids who watched pornography said they actually thought it gave them helpful information about sex education, and almost 30% said it accurately reflected sex and intimacy. So obviously that's a big problem if we have so many kids watching pornography and really thinking this is a true depiction of love and intimacy. So we know how important it is. We know the exposures there. We know the ramifications and how deeply this affects kids and teens and adults and the pornography consumption that's out there. So we need to start having these conversations earlier. And this is the surprising part sometimes where you say, okay, maybe you talk to your 5-year-old, and I get a lot of parents say the word pornography or have a big talk at 5. That's too much. But hear this, try this. If I come home and I talk to my boys and I say, hey boys, maybe you're on the iPad today. Do you ever see anything that makes you feel uncomfortable or just feels kind of weird? Well, like what? Does anybody maybe not have clothes on, or maybe where their bathing suit parts should have something covered, but they're not covered up? Nope, we don't see that. Okay, great. If you do, it's not your fault. No big deal. Just put it down and come and tell me. Okay? Yep. Okay, got it. Was that big and scary? No. Did I say the word pornography? No. But now do my kids know exactly what to look for? Yes. And more importantly, do they know exactly what to do? I gave them 2 tangible steps. Put it down and come and tell somebody. That was a conversation about pornography. It wasn't a big, scary, long, drawn-out talk. It shouldn't be that big, scary, long, drawn-out talk. Instead, it should be these persistent little check-ins and small conversations and consistent. And so that is my homework to all of you for the next couple of days, is to go home and have a pornography conversation with your child. Not big and scary, just as quick and simple of what I said. Anything that makes you feel uncomfortable or weird, anybody doesn't have clothes on, that should. What happens if you see that? Just put it down and tell someone, and then give them a list of someone's to tell. We want to make porn the norm. This is where we always get giggles and laughs, right? And I said, take it out of context. This is great, right? Hey, I just got back from this talk at Crosspoint Moms, and we talked about making porn the norm. We had brunch, like it was great. That's not exactly what we mean, right? We mean normalizing these conversations so it's not this big, scary, shameful, off-limit word in your house. Because we know that if we don't talk about it, it's not going to stop our kids' curiosity or maybe their accidental exposure, right? If we're not open to talking about it, all it means is they're not going to be comfortable talking to us about it. And then instead, they're going to get their answers online from TikTok and Snapchat and YouTube and the places where we don't want them getting those information. So talk to your kids about it often, make it more normal. So when it happens, not when, but not if, but when it happens, they will know what to do and they will come to you and tell you. And then it kicks in. I always get the question, okay, they do all that right. What do I do when they come and tell me they saw something? What as a parent do I do? And the first thing we always say is don't freak out, right? It's an easy reaction to have, but don't freak out, because think about it. This whole time you've been telling your kids, hey, if this ever happens, just put it down, come tell me. And then it happens and they put it down and they tell you and they did everything right, everything we just asked them to do. And then we freak out. What's going to happen the second time it happens? Our kids probably aren't going to want to tell us if we go into this big freak out lecture, right? So we have to maintain our posture and first of all, not freak out, and then praise them for telling us and explaining and having this conversation. And then you can talk about what you saw. So as a mom, we have to check our reaction when it happens. And then these are some warning signs of what to look at if you think your child or someone you know may be having some issues with pornography. So we talk about tricky people, what we used to call stranger danger. Before, when I go off to the park, my mom say, "Hey, Michelle, watch out for any white unmarked vans that might be giving away candy and puppies. Okay, everybody else is safe." Obviously, that's not the way it is anymore. So we have to talk to our kids about the scary people that they can look for and what some of those traits are, telling them that most oftentimes it's these nice people who are reaching out and starting these conversations, and then telling our kids, giving them permission not to respond to them. Because oftentimes we've raised our kids to be polite and respectful and always respond to someone and answer their questions. And we've heard that from kids saying, "I just didn't want to be rude." So it's important to give our kids permission not to talk to people they don't know online, and that our kids know without any shadow of a doubt that they can always land safely and softly with us. So Proverbs 15:1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." And this brings us to our final C word, is coaching. It's not just parental controls, but caring controls, because we know our kids are always going to be smarter with us on technology. If they want to find a way around some of our parental controls that we have, they are going to do it. It's not a flawless system. We've already seen that, right? So we have to base this in the relational piece and then put the parental control process on them, but do that with them. Get them involved. Ask their opinions. Hey, what type of rules do you think we should have for our technology? What type of rules do you think that we should make for you? And just as importantly, what type of rules do you see for mom and dad? Hey, if we tell you that you shouldn't have your phone in your bedroom, guess what? Mom and dad probably shouldn't have ours in ours either. So talk to our kids about the rules and talk to them about the why, and also say, hey, if this rule is good for you, it's also a good rule for us and for our whole family. And again, we're not trying to catch you doing something wrong, but maybe we're putting this filter on because it's not good for your eyes and heart to see this. It's also not good for any of us. We don't need that content coming in. So talk in terms of whole family rules and not making it seem like it's us against our kids. We want it to be an us with them, not against them. And this is one of the QR codes on your note-taking guide as well, is creating this digital trust playbook. Again, starting these expectations is so much easier when you do it at the beginning of giving them technology usage. Not to say if they already have this, you can't back up, but talk about some of these expectations from the beginning. Co-ownership. This is not just your phone. This is mom and dad's phone that we're using together. There's no password protection on it. I should be able to pick up your phone at any time. Turn the tables and say, hey, son or daughter, you should be able to pick up my phone at any time. There shouldn't be anything on my phone that you can't see either. We're all using our technology responsibly. Talk about the location of the phone, where it's permitted, where it's not. No bedrooms, no bathrooms. Talk about on buses. It's a hard one to police, but a place that a lot of exposure happens. Talk about sleepovers. A lot of things can go wrong with sleepovers and technology. Talk about when they go to grandparents' houses. That's another big place, because oftentimes kids know that the parental controls and setup that they have at grandma and grandpa's house may not be strict, and they may not know as much about their technology that they can get away with. So talk about where they have it and how they're using it with them. And then we're going to talk about the right hardware and software. And these specifically are great resources when you go back to check out our website or an app, because you may have a really specific tech setup question at home, and this will show you what it is. But one of the places to start that's always most important is your router. And oftentimes this is the biggest question I get. I don't know, do I have a router? Is it a modem? Are they the same thing? Do I have both? What's the difference? And we have a great blog post on our website as well that really talks about modems and routers. But here's kind of the quick, simple gist. You definitely have a modem. It's usually hardwired, and it's fine if you have just one device. If you have more than one device in your home and Wi-Fi, then you also have a router. What that does is it routes that wireless signal to all the devices in your home. So think of that router as the hub of all the internet at your home. So you want to protect this hub before it sends out the searches to all of your devices. Because we know that 27% of content online that's not filtered is explicit. So think about this. If you have a coffee table with 4 magazines, 3 of them are fine and 1 is pornographic, and your child walks into that room, how confident are you that they're not going to pick up that one pornographic magazine? That's a 25% risk, right? That's the same odds that we're playing if we give our kids access to the internet without any type of these filters or monitors. So we have a list on our website that talks about the different monitors, but this is the one that we most recommend. It's the Griffin router. What it does, it has this blocking software on it. So if you type in a search, think back to my Cowgirl Alley, it actually blocks those websites before they even appear to be able to click on. So I wouldn't have actually even seen a lot of this content. It also has a lot of features where you can set screen times for different devices and different profiles. You can turn off the Wi-Fi remotely from your house if you're somewhere else. You will be alerted if a friend comes over and starts using your Wi-Fi. So this is probably the most important part that you can put on for parental control. Is it perfect? No. Why not? Can your child switch off Wi-Fi and start using data and then get around those controls? Yes. Like we talked about, relational and talking about it, but this is the sprinkling of technology that you can put in so that way their searches and content that they're seeing is not explicit on your home Wi-Fi. A couple other elements, especially for kids who may be at that age where they want a phone, but again, you don't think they need that smartphone and all the access to the app and the app store. A couple of options are the Bark phone and the wireless, Gab wireless, excuse me. It looks like an actual smartphone or a smartwatch, but for instance, it doesn't have all the features. So Gab, it only has talk and text. There's no access to the app store or internet. So they can't get on social media or the internet, but it's a great trainer phone because that way you can actually talk to them and text and maybe have GPS so you know where they are, but they can't get online. So it's a great kind of training phone for when they later have a smartphone. And then we talk about the right software, because after they actually have their technology, they may be taking this off of your Wi-Fi and bringing it somewhere else. So now we have different protections at the device level. So this is software that you can put on the device in addition to the hardware. One is Covenant Eyes, which is great, especially for older kids and teens and adults. It's an accountability software for pornography where they have an accountability partner. Bark is a really popular one, especially for that middle school and kind of those ages when they're really starting their technology, because it pairs with your phone, and kind of think of it as a second pair of eyes, because we may not be monitoring every single email and post that they put on social media, but Bark is with a specific algorithm they have, and it can pull out specifically dangerous content such as suicide or self-harm or this. And then it alerts you. So that way you know to talk to your child about what is on their phone. And then a lot of their controls are just native to your devices. So Google and Android has some. They are very cumbersome to use, but they're in there. And also Apple iPhone has some of their own screen time controls in there as well. One of our biggest recommendations is to turn off access to the App Store for your kids. So for instance, they can't even look at what's on the apps, or it sends you an alert to say, hey, your child wants this app. Are you going to accept or decline it? And I will say that's been on my kid's phone since the beginning. Like I mentioned, my son's 18. We haven't even taken it off yet. Why? Just because that is what we've always had. And that's what they've gone accustomed to. Because that way, if they want an app, we can apply that 7-day rule. We can look at the app, we can check it out, and then decide if it's appropriate for them. If we gave them access to the App Store, they could download things that wouldn't be appropriate. And they could also download something like a virtual private network where then could circumnavigate the other parental controls that we have in place. So that way their internet usage would not be going through the Griffin router and they could get to that explicit content. So take away access to that app store for your kids who have their own phone and technology. Why do we need to do all of this? Because we know that in the digital world that's so hostile towards our kids, our response must be strong and relevant. And as parents and moms, we can't be apathetic to what is going on in their technology lives. So hopefully by learning this, you'll feel more prepared and balanced and help your kids feel more protected online. And so this concludes our digital trust framework, again, with the Copy Me, Co-Play, Curiosity, Conversation, and Coaching. And here are some of these follow-up resources that we have. This PYE digital download is our digital newsletter that comes out maybe about once a month, and it talks about all of the updates that we have. There's a QR code that you can scan. This should be on your note-taking guide as well. The Protect app that you can check out that has all of these blog posts and step-by-step parental controls that we have. The Childhood 2.0 that you can watch on YouTube. And then also using us on social media as new updates are coming out, that we will post that on there. So that way you know, hey, maybe there's an update on the parental controls that we need to get in, or some new technology thing that we have. Check us out on all of the social media so you can get updated on the ever-changing world that's out there. So Liz, I know we're getting to the end of our time, so I am going to pass it off to you to see if there's any questions that you'd like to facilitate with any of your moms. And I know it was a lot of information. And so again, I'm sure there might still be some questions, or you may go home later and think, oh, there was this question I forgot to ask, but now I'm thinking of it. So please check out our website and our app. And if you have a specific question or a specific text setup question, you can email me directly. It is Michelle L. It's, and my name only has one L in it. So it's Michele and then an L for Loschetz at protectyoungeyes.com. Or if you go on our website, any button that you click that says get information about a presentation or just request information, anything that you click on there automatically lands in my inbox. So you can reach out anytime. We answer questions on a daily basis between myself and Doug and Chris on our team. So we will have that information back to you. So we want to be here as a resource now and in the future when you have new questions. We have those resources to look at, to watch our videos, to look online, and then just reach out to us directly to see how we can help. Great. Well, thank you so much, Liz, especially for all your facilitating. It still felt very nice and interactive, even though I couldn't see your mom. So thank you for doing that and making that more helpful for all of us. And thank you again for the invitation. Hope you guys have a great rest of your morning together and a great day.